Shanghai Summer is a game that immediately caught my attention thanks to its art design and the catching thumbnail art you find on the eShop. Now, what I found on playing this game was not what I expected, and that is what I want to take you through today in this review. My name's Alex, this is SwitchCorner, and if you enjoy the video, subscribe helps out the channel a huge amount. The story definitely kicks off in this intriguing way. We are greeted by a talking black cat that explains we are in the junction. This is the edge of consciousness, and it is the place where countless dreams they begin and end. We just so happen to be stuck here, and we can only return to our own reality by facing a test. This is essentially a breakdown of events that led to this situation. There is also another problem alongside this as well, and that is we have some memory gaps, basically about not only ourselves, but also about those friends and family that surround us. So on awakening after this moment, we do question how real this scenario was, but it is quickly established to be true. Now we must investigate this location, look for clues, and engage with our friends. In total, it can take up to 12 in-game days, but multiple branching pathways they can lead to an early conclusion. Fortunately, the game has this chapter system though, allowing you to jump back in as these branches do occur. It's a good concept, and once again I was excited to jump in, having read the eShop description and watched a few of the trailers, but sadly this is where the big problem occurs. It's a poor translation, to the point where some sentences barely made sense, and frequently I found myself rereading sentences just so I could kind of translate them into my own words and almost figure out what they were aiming to say. It's basically almost, for the most part at least, close enough that you can figure it out, so to speak, but disappointing because it definitely leads to additional confusion in what is already a relatively complex idea in its narrative. Think here though, not only misspelt words, but punctuation issues, constant sentence structures that are wrong, a few sentences that made no sense at all, and yeah, it almost reads like they plugged the original script into Google Translate and just simply pressed go. That's honestly a shame as well, because underneath all of this, I do think there's a good narrative idea. You see glimpses of it every so often, and the ending, I thought it was a satisfying conclusion, but the journey there is just an incredibly bumpy one, to, I guess, put it lightly. Now, if you're paying attention to the subtitles in the background as well, you've already noticed countless mistakes. I'm not talking the odd sentence here and there, I'm not trying to be overly critical, but I am talking every few minutes over the course of what is, I'd say, 4 to 5 hours in total. I think the biggest issue from all of this, however, is the impact it has on the characters. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, each time I interacted with the smaller cast, a best friend, an ex-girlfriend, the list goes on, feels like their command of the language changes, making it difficult to relate to their personalities. So I think they might speak in a professional manner one moment, then all of a sudden they are throwing slang and swearing in. It's just incredibly confusing, and there's a couple of situations that just had me laughing out loud, and I promise you that wasn't the intended reaction. I actually spent so long sitting with this game in one go as well, I was starting to confuse myself. I actually had to call my wife in and ask her how incorrect is this sentence, and thankfully she did confirm my opinion. I would describe it as, it gives you the outline of the story, you then have to occasionally look at the sentence and try and figure out what they were trying to say, and alongside this there's just these jarring narrative shifts, especially again from the characters around you, that just make no sense. The story though again has potential, but this appears to have lacked any sort of professional translation team, even though I will say I did check the credits at the end of the game and it does mention one. I hope they can fix it up, but as it is currently, they need to patch what I would consider to be 90% of the script, and that's before you actually get to the fact it's not just in the sense of spelling mistakes or typical grammatical issues, but the personalities and the tone of the writing, it needs to be balanced throughout for each character. So essentially, to a certain degree, it's almost going to have to require a full rewrite. Gameplay is simplistic and honestly it works, but I have my issues here too. Now, the idea is simple enough. It's a 2D experience where you explore a few locations, engage in conversations with friends, and unravel some basic clues. Controls, simple. You can access a diary which gives you an idea of how you are progressing. You can collect the stickers found throughout the world, completely optional, and you can reflect on current relationships as well. You can also then of course interact with objects in the world. Now this, it is very much a visual novel with some basic gameplay attached. I liked the locations overall, I will say that. But what you had to do next within them was often a little cryptic. I think they actually may have realized this as well in development, because you can hit the right trigger and it will give you a clue, or at least it says it's going to give you a clue. What it actually does is simply tell you exactly where you need to go. There's not a lot else to it, honestly. Occasionally you'll make some dialogue decisions, and the locations, again, I did look forward to seeing what came next, but I wouldn't be coming here for it. That's the big problem here. The draw of this one is supposed to be that narrative. I also had a few issues. Occasionally I had this problem where the game wouldn't select what I wanted unless I slightly repositioned my character. Then there's a few situations that have this annoying setup, such as it wants you to go to the bookstore. That is the place where you are working, but what it doesn't tell you is, first of all, you need to talk to someone briefly. So what this means is you kind of stand there clicking on the bookshop trying to enter it, nothing happens, so you think to yourself, well, now the game is broken. But actually, when you check, you can still move. When you finally give in and click the clue button, it points you to this random thing you need to do first that the game actually didn't communicate to you. Visually, then, I do like the look of the game. I don't think in action it reaches the heights of the stunning eShop thumbnail art, which also happens to act as the main menu art, but I really do like the character models, and the locations, while smaller, they have just enough, I guess, in them to keep me exploring. There's also some really nice full screen stills for big story beats, and the portraits during dialogue are particularly well done, though they don't feature any movement. On that note, actually, I do wish the locations had a little bit more movement, moving elements. They constantly feel like lifeless, static, so some representation of foot traffic, it would have went a long way. But still, overall, I do think it is a good looking game, and I think it's got a very nice artistic style. Audio finally, and it's okay. There's no voice acting, unfortunately. That probably would have actually helped the team here, probably would have highlighted the script issues for them. But there is at least some very minor environmental effects, and there's also this acoustic soundtrack. Now, it's not a huge soundtrack, I do want to point that out. It's essentially going to be looping maybe the same couple of songs frequently throughout, but they never get annoying, and I actually found them quite relaxing. There is a couple of highlight moments as well in the audio, which I'm happy to report, but there's a couple of songs that appear with vocals, and these are absolutely stunning. Wasn't what I expected, and sadly that's not in a positive way. I knew it was going to be heavy on narrative, and I knew it had some light adventure elements, but when the story is the big focus, you've got to check again, and it appears this translation wasn't checked by someone where English was the first language. I'd actually love to hear from someone who plays the game in Chinese on how the delivery was, because I'm sure that is much better. As it stands though, the game just can't deliver on consistent characters. You're gonna have to reread sentences to make sense of them, and again, that tonality of the script is all over the place. So as it stands, I can't recommend the experience. It is bad, and on my scale, that is unfortunately a 3 out of 10. But instead, today I'm gonna say this: it needs a patch, and a big one, because if they can get the writing straightened out, I think there is a story in here worth experiencing that definitely goes to some interesting places. And again, getting to the conclusion was difficult, but it was satisfying when I got there. I just kind of had to work a lot harder than I did anticipate. Honestly, I think I could make this one more understandable myself with a single pass at it, so I don't think it'd be maybe too big a job. It's just whether they can balance out the characters at the same time. So will you be checking out Shanghai Summer? Let me know in the comments. Definitely disappointing, but I hope they can figure it out, and I will happily return to it the second I hear word an update has been dropped. And I will update this video as well, because I want games like this to be successful, and I don't want this to be the video audiences are finding in the future should they get things in line. So with that, hit subscribe, join us here for reviews, deals, news and lists daily, and I'll see you all on the next video. Thanks everyone.